This is a story about the largest city on earth in the year 1200, a place called Angkor, sprawling across 1,000 square kilometers of what is now Cambodia, and about the ordinary people who lived there, the women who ran its markets, the grandmothers who kept its oldest prayers, the young who prepared its records on leaves that would not last, and a stone carver who was asked to look at all of them carefully enough to make their lives permanent. It is a story about what endures and what vanishes, and about the quiet moment when someone learns to see what has been in front of them all along. But first, let us arrive. The city you are entering is not the one you may have imagined. If you have seen photographs of Angkor, the great towers of sandstone rising from tangled roots, the silent corridors open to the sky, then you have seen only the skeleton, the bones of a body that was once immense and warm and alive. Where the modern eye finds rough stone and creeping jungle, the 13th century eye would have seen something astonishing. Golden spires catching the morning light above an ocean of thatched rooftops and cooking smoke stretching to the horizon in every direction. The temples that survive today were finished in gleaming lacquer and gilt. The city that surrounded them, the real city, the one where 750,000 people woke each morning and cooked their rice and went about the work of being alive, was built almost entirely of wood and thatch and palm leaf, and it is gone. Every house, every market mat, every fish trap and sleeping platform and bamboo fence, the jungle took it back, and the monsoon rains helped, and the centuries finished the work. What remains is the exception. What has vanished was the rule. Let us see it as it was. It is the early dry season, perhaps November, perhaps December, and the air has shed the heaviest of the monsoon's moisture, but still carries a warmth that settles against the skin like cloth. The dawn light finds its way through the canopy of sugar palms and silk cotton trees and falls across a landscape that is neither city nor countryside, but something in between, something for which the modern world has no ready word. Raised earthen mounds stretch in a loose grid through the trees, each mound the foundation for a thatched house on timber stilts, each house accompanied by a small rectangular pond, 20 paces across, perhaps 30, where families wash and draw water and keep fish. The ponds catch the early light and hold it, still in bronze. Between the mounds run footpaths of packed earth, and beyond the footpaths, canals, the arteries of a water system so vast and so precisely engineered that it could feed rice paddies 3 and 4 times a year, in a rhythm the farmers had maintained for generations. The sounds reach you before the sights resolve. Roosters first. Beneath every house, chickens and pigs are stirring in the dust under the stilts, and the roosters announce themselves without regard for anyone's preference. Then the deeper rhythm, the wooden thud of rice being pounded in a mortar, carried across the mounds from a compound you cannot see. Then the hiss and crackle of a hearth being lit, 3 stones sunk into the earth, a handful of dried palm frond fed to the coals, and the first thin ribbon of wood smoke rising through the thatch, and beneath it all, steady as breathing, the cicadas whose metallic hiss fills the temple corridors even now, who blend with the bark of the trees and fall silent when you approach. The smell is what would stop you. It is not unpleasant exactly, but it is unfamiliar, and it is everywhere. It rises from clay jars tucked under every house platform and sealed with palm leaf lids, a smell that is sharp and deep and alive, part ocean floor, part wet earth, apart something older than either, fermented fish paste, the thing called prahok, the preserved protein that feeds this civilization through every season. It is Angkor's signature, more defining than any spire. Mixed with the wood smoke and the warm mud of the canal banks and the faint sweetness of incense from a household shrine, it makes an atmosphere that belongs to this place and no other. And there, rising above the tree line to the south, catching the first full light of morning, the towers, 5 of them arranged in a quincunx, their sandstone surfaces still carrying traces of the gold and lacquer that once made them blaze. Angkor Wat, the temple that has drawn the eye of the world for 800 years. But the people waking on these mounds do not stare at it the way a visitor would. It is their skyline. It is the direction they orient by, as natural and unremarkable as the position of the sun. They live beside it and within its enclosure, and some of them work inside its galleries. But their lives play out below the tree line, in the intimate geography of pond and path and hearth. This is where the story lives, not in the stone that remembers, but in the wood and leaf and water that forgot. And somewhere in this city, on a morning very much like this one, a man has been given an assignment he does not yet understand, to look at the ordinary life unfolding around him and carve it into the walls of a temple, so that it might outlast the thatch and the palm leaf and the prahok jars and the people themselves. He does not know yet how to see what he is looking at. He will learn, but not alone, and not quickly, and not in the way he expects. For now the morning is young, and the light is moving across the mounds, and in one particular house within the great enclosure, a house no different from its neighbors, with its thatched roof and its stilts and its pond reflecting the sky, a woman is already awake, listening to the roosters quarrel beneath her, waiting for her knees to agree to the ladder. Her name is Leap, and she has lived in this house for 43 years. She was carried here as a young bride, climbed this same ladder when the wood was still pale and unseasoned, and has descended it every morning since. Through pregnancies, through monsoons that shook the stilts, through the slow accumulation of years that has made the rungs smooth as river stone beneath her feet. The ladder has 12 rungs. She knows each one by the way it receives her weight. This morning, as every morning, she lies still for a moment before moving. The sleeping platform is warm beneath her, the accumulated heat of 3 bodies through the night, though the other 2 have not yet stirred. She listens. The roosters first, always the roosters, their indignant conversations erupting beneath the house in staccato bursts. Then the softer clucking of hens, the scrape and shuffle of pigs adjusting in the dust below the stilts. From several mounds away, the rhythmic thud of someone pounding rice in a wooden mortar, a sound so constant across the city's mornings that silence would be more startling than the noise. And beyond all of this, the high, sustained hiss of cicadas beginning their day-long chorus in the surrounding trees, a sound like the air itself vibrating. Leap sits up. The motion is deliberate, negotiated between her will and her hips, which have their own opinions about mornings. She swings her legs over the platform edge and finds the top rung with her toes, testing it the way one tests the temperature of water, not from doubt, but from respect. Then she descends, 12 rungs. Her hands grip the worn rails, her bare feet curling around each step. At 68 years, the ladder is not an obstacle, but a conversation. Some mornings her knees are generous, and she moves quickly. Other mornings they resist, and she pauses at the fourth rung, at the seventh, letting the joints find their willingness. Today is a middle morning, neither generous nor grudging. She arrives at the ground and stands for a moment on the packed earth beneath the house, letting her feet settle. Her first task belongs to no one else. A few paces from the house mound, at the base of a silk cotton tree whose roots have grown thick enough to sit on, there is a stone. It is not a carved stone, not one of the temple's fitted sandstone blocks, though it may once have been a fragment of something larger. The corner of a lintel or the base of a balustrade, recycled from the temple enclosure the way so many stones have been recycled into paths and house foundations and hearth supports. Time and weather have worn away whatever markings it once bore. What matters is that it sits at the eastern root of the silk cotton tree, facing the pond, and that it has sat there since before Leap was born. This is the family's Neek Ta, the ancestor spirit of this particular place, not of the great temple nearby, not of the king's divine lineage, but of this mound, this tree, this stretch of earth between the house and the water. Leap's mother tended it. Her mother's mother tended it before that. The Neek Ta does not ask for grandeur. It asks for consistency. Leap kneels, her knees registering the motion with a quiet protest she ignores, and lights a stick of incense. The smoke rises thin and pale in the early light, catching the breeze off the pond and curling toward the tree's canopy. She places a small ball of last night's rice at the stone's base. She murmurs. The words are not a prayer exactly, not a petition. They are more like the words one speaks to a neighbor across a fence, an acknowledgement of presence, a maintenance of connection. The Neek Ta does not respond. Leap does not expect it to. The offering is not transactional. It is custodial. You tend the shrine the way you tend the hearth, not because something has gone wrong, but because tending is what makes things not go wrong. She rises, brushes the earth from her knees, and turns back toward the house. The incense will burn to ash before the sun clears the tree line. The rice will be taken by ants or birds. The practice will repeat tomorrow. Above her, on the platform, a second figure stirs. Chan descends the ladder with the unhurried ease of a woman who has been climbing it since girlhood. She is 41, broad-shouldered, with the particular solidity of a person whose body has been shaped by daily labor rather than any deliberate effort at strength. Her hair is wound in a top knot, her sampot, a plain black cotton wrap, already tied at the waist. She is bare above it, as nearly everyone in the city is, from the king's household down to the poorest farmer's wife. The morning air is warm enough that cloth on the shoulders would be an encumbrance, not a comfort. She goes to the hearth. It sits just beyond the house mound's edge, sheltered by a lean-to of palm thatch that keeps the rain off during the wet season. 3 stones buried in the ground with space between them for the fire. The same arrangement used in every household in the city. The same arrangement Joe Daguan will describe when he visits nearly a century from now and marvels at its simplicity. Chan kneels and arranges the kindling, dried palm fronds and split wood, in the gap between the stones. A handful of embers kept banked overnight beneath a clay cover catches the new fuel, and within moments the fire is breathing. She sets the earthenware rice pot over the flames. It is a heavy vessel, brown-black with accumulated smoke stain, its walls thickened by years of daily use. water from the pond carried in a smaller pot, rice measured by hand, a practiced gesture, the same amount every morning, enough for three. The water begins to murmur, then to bubble, and the first true smell of the day rises, wood smoke and rice steam, the base note of every Angkorian morning. While the rice cooks, Chan turns to the sauce. The prahok jar sits in a sheltered corner of the compound, a squat clay vessel sealed with a fitted lid and a layer of cloth beneath it. When she lifts the lid, the smell rises, thick and layered, the deep fermented reek of salted freshwater fish that has been breaking down in the tropical heat for months, a warmth in the nostrils that is almost physical. It is the olfactory signature of the entire civilization. Every household in Angkor produces prahok or buys it or barters for it. The making of it is communal, families gathering during the fishing season to gut and salt the small silver fish from the tonle sap, packing them into jars, sealing them, waiting. The result is an ingredient so central to the diet that a common saying holds that a dish without prahok is a dish without flavor. Chan spoons a portion into the smaller earthenware saucepan, adds water, sets it beside the rice pot on the 3-stone hearth. The two vessels simmer together, their smells braiding. The third person to descend the ladder is Jorani. She is 17, with the long limbs and unhurried movements of someone still accustoming herself to her own height. She comes down the rungs without gripping the rails, her bare feet finding each step from memory, her eyes still half-focused with the residue of sleep. She does not greet anyone. Greeting is not required in this household, not because warmth is absent, but because the warmth is built into the routine itself. Jorani's arrival at the ground is a greeting. The way she moves to the pond and fills the water vessel without being asked is a greeting. The way she sets it beside her mother at the hearth, her hand briefly touching Chan's shoulder as she passes, is all the good morning anyone needs. They work in parallel. Chan stirs the sauce, adjusts the fire, tests the rice by pressing a grain between thumb and forefinger. Jorani carries the earthenware dishes, simple, brown, undecorated, to the platform where the morning meal will be eaten. She folds 3 spoons from nipa palm leaves, twisting and pressing the broad green fronds into small concave shapes with practiced fingers. These spoons will be used once to carry the liquid prahok sauce to the mouth and then discarded. They are made fresh each morning. They cost nothing. They grow at the water's edge. In a household that owns no metal utensils, no ceramic bowls for sauce, no furniture of any kind, the Nypa palm provides with the quiet abundance of a tree that does not know it is essential. The meal is eaten on the house platform, no table, no chairs. The 3 women sit on the smooth wooden surface, Leap with her legs extended, easing the pressure on her knees. Chan cross-legged, compact, centered. Jorani folded beneath herself in the way only the young can fold. The rice is served on earthenware plates. The brahok sauce sits in a small bowl made from a single broad leaf, folded and pressed into shape, watertight despite having no seam or seal, a small engineering marvel of organic design. Coconut husk ladles rest beside the pot. The food is simple, the same meal eaten on 10,000 mounds across the city this morning. Rice and fermented fish, the twin foundations of everything. Beneath the platform, the pigs root in the shade of the stilts. 2 chickens dispute ownership of something in the dust, a grain, an insect, some treasure invisible to human eyes. The smell of the animals rises through the platform gaps and mingles with the wood smoke and the prahawk and the faint sweetness of the silk cotton tree in flower near the pond. Leap eats slowly. Chan eats with the focused efficiency of a woman whose morning has a schedule. Jorani eats the way she does everything, without hurry, without dawdling, occupying the moment as fully as the moment allows. When the meal is finished, Chan rises first. She moves to the corner of the platform where the market goods are stored, sealed prahok jars of various sizes and ages, a stack of fresh leaves for folding into bowls, the bamboo measuring cups used for portioning rice in trade. She begins to arrange them into the carrying basket, layering the heavier jars at the bottom, padding them with cloth. Jorani watches for a moment, then stands to help, lifting the basket to test its weight, adjusting the pad of folded krama that will cushion it on her mother's head. They do not discuss the plan. The plan is the same as yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. The market opens at sunrise. It closes at midday. Between those hours, Chan and Jorani will sit on their mat on the open ground and sell prahok to the women and men and servants of the enclosure. And when the midday heat empties the market, they will gather the unsold jars and the measuring cups and walk home along the path between the mounds, past the ponds that mirror the sky, under the tree line where the great towers are visible only as shadows against the light, and they will return to this platform and this hearth and this ladder, and the afternoon will unfold in its own rhythm, and the evening will come, and Leap will make her second offering at the Neek stone, and the day will close as it opened, with the sound of roosters settling beneath the house and the incense smoke thinning to nothing in the dark. But first, the market. Chan lifts the basket to her head with a single smooth motion, the kind of motion that looks effortless only because it has been performed 10,000 times. Jorani gathers the leaf materials and the smaller bundles into her arms. They descend the ladder, one after the other, and turn onto the path that leads toward the market clearing, where the first mats are already being unrolled on the ground, and the voices of women are beginning to rise in the early heat. The path from Chan's house mound to the market clearing is not long, perhaps 300 paces, but it passes through the full texture of the enclosure's morning life. Chan walks ahead, the basket balanced on the folded krama atop her head, her spine straight, her pace unhurried. Jorani follows a step behind, arms full of bundled palm leaves and the smaller earthenware measuring cups nested together in a cloth. They pass other women on the same path, all moving in the same direction, all carrying something, baskets of fruit, bundles of woven cloth, clay jars stoppered with leaves, a live chicken held upside down by its feet, its wings hanging open and still. A man drives a pair of oxen pulling a wooden cart loaded with cut sugar cane, the wheels creaking in the ruts of the raised path. The cows move with patient indifference. They are work animals only. Their meat is not eaten here. Their purpose is the cart and the plow and nothing else. The man clicks his tongue and the oxen drift slightly to the side, and the line of women flows past without breaking stride. The market clearing has no walls and no roof. It has no stalls, no tables, no permanent structures of any kind. It is simply a broad expanse of beaten earth at the intersection of two paths, open to the sky, bordered on one side by a row of silk cotton trees whose roots buckle the ground in long, slow ridges. What transforms this clearing into a market is the simplest possible act: women unrolling mats on the ground and sitting down on them. By the time Chan and Jorani arrive, perhaps 40 mats are already occupied. By the time the sun clears the tree line, there will be twice that number. Each mat defines a space roughly the size of a sleeping platform, enough room for the vendor, her goods, and the narrow aisle where customers crouch or kneel to examine what is offered. A fee is collected by an official who walks the rows each morning, noting who occupies which space. The fee is paid in rice, measured into a cup, poured into the official's sack without ceremony or negotiation. The amount is fixed. The space is familiar. Chan has paid for this same patch of ground so many times that the official barely pauses at her mat before moving on. She sets the basket down and begins to arrange the jars. The largest jar, the one containing prahok that has fermented for a full year, dark and pungent and thick as river clay, goes to the center. The newer batches, lighter in color and sharper in smell, flank it on either side. The leaf bowls Jorani has been folding since before dawn are stacked in a neat column to the left. The earthenware measuring cups, 2 sizes, one for a single meal's portion, one for a family's weekly supply, sit within easy reach of Chan's right hand. The rice she will receive in payment will be measured into a cloth sack behind her. There is no coin currency in this market. For small purchases, rice is the medium of exchange. For larger transactions, a length of good cloth, a bronze tool, a ceramic vessel imported from the Chinese traders who pass through the territory, bolts of fabric serve as currency. But at Chan's mat, the economy is intimate. A cup of rice for a leaf bowl of prahok, repeated dozens of times between sunrise and midday. Jorani settles into her place at her mother's left side and begins folding more leaf bowls from the fresh nipa palm fronds. Her fingers work without her attention, the crease, the tuck, the fold that makes the seam waterproof so the bowl can hold liquid without leaking. Each bowl will be used once, filled with prahok or sauce, carried away by the buyer, and discarded after the meal. They are the most ephemeral objects in the market, made in minutes, used in an hour, gone by evening, and yet without them the prahok cannot be sold. Jorani's hands are as essential to the transaction as Chan's knowledge of fermentation. The mat beside them belongs to Bofa, who sells cloth. She has been here as long as Chan, longer perhaps. Her goods are cotton kramas in checked patterns, the everyday utility cloth that every person in the city owns and uses for everything: head covering, baby sling, hand towel, bundle wrap, belt, bandage. Beside the kramas are folded sampots in solid black cotton, the garment of the commoner woman, wrapped at the waist and falling to the ankle, undecorated because the law does not permit decoration. Only officials of certain rank may wear cloth with a 2-flower pattern. Among the common people, only women are granted this privilege, and only rarely. The patterns on a person's cloth announce their station to everyone they pass on the road, and the sumptuary laws have teeth. Bofa does not sell patterned cloth. She sells the cloth of ordinary life. Chan and Bofa exchange the morning's greeting, a few words about the heat, the quality of this season's cotton, the rumor that a new bolt of Siamese silk has arrived somewhere in the enclosure and is being offered for a staggering quantity of rice. The conversation is brief and practiced, comfortable in the way of 2 women who have occupied adjacent mats for years. It carries no particular weight and does not need to. It is the verbal equivalent of Leap's morning offering at the Nikta stone, a practice maintained through regularity rather than urgency, connecting one person to another the same way incense connects the living to the unseen. The market fills, the sounds layer over one another, the voices of women calling out what they have, describing quality and quantity and freshness, the slap of a fish being cleaned on a flat stone at the mat where the fisherman's wife sells the morning catch from the tonle sap, the crack of sugar cane being cut into sections with a heavy blade, the low complaints of chickens in woven cages, the murmur of negotiation, which in this market is always between women because the local people who know how to trade are all women. This is not a custom, but a structural fact, the foundation on which the daily commerce of the empire rests. Let us move through the market as Chan might see it, her eyes lifting occasionally between customers. The produce mats offer what the season provides. Here, the heavy golden weight of ripe bananas stacked in tiers, their skins still warm from the morning's first sun. There, bundles of dark green mustard leaves beaded with pond water, and beside them the wrinkled red skin of lychees in loose piles. A woman holds up stalks of lotus root pulled from the shallows that morning, the cut ends still trailing water onto the beaten earth. Further along the rows, a grandmother who might be Leap's age sits behind a mat covered with dried herbs and roots, the pharmacopoeia of the Khmer, the traditional healer, whose remedies blur the line between the medicinal and the spiritual. The smell of the market is a composite thing, impossible to separate into its parts. The fermented sharpness of prahok from a dozen mats, the green scent of cut leaves, the earthen sweetness of wet clay vessels, the warm animal smell drifting from the caged poultry, the faint sweetness of incense from a vendor who sells temple offering supplies near the market's northern edge. Chan works steadily through the morning. A woman approaches, crouches, examines the year-old prahok, asks about the newer batch. Chan opens the jar and the smell rises, the deep, complex, almost cheese-like intensity of well-fermented fish paste, the smell that has earned it the name of Cambodian cheese, the smell that permeates every household and every meal and every memory of this city. She portions a taste onto a leaf fragment. The woman considers, nods, holds out her measuring cup of rice. The exchange is completed. Jarani hands across a filled leaf bowl, its seams tight, its surface slightly damp. The woman rises and moves on. Another takes her place. Between customers, Chan's hands rest on her knees. She does not fidget. She does not scan the market with the restless attention of someone looking for the next transaction. She simply sits in her space with the settled weight of a woman who knows exactly where she is and what she is doing and why she is here. Her weight is centered. Her shoulders are still. If you watched her from a distance, you might notice the particular quality of this stillness. Not the stillness of someone waiting, but the stillness of someone who has already arrived. She is not between moments. She is in the moment, the way a stone is in the ground. At the far edge of the clearing, several paces from the nearest vendor mat, a man sits on the exposed root of a silk cotton tree. He has a flat piece of bark cloth spread on a stone surface across his knees. He holds a stylus of some kind, a sharpened reed perhaps, or a sliver of bamboo tipped with a dark substance. He is looking at the market. His eyes move slowly from one mat to the next, pausing, returning, pausing again. He is not buying anything. He is not selling anything. He does not appear to be waiting for anyone. He is simply there, the way the tree roots are there, and the morning light, and the sound of the women's voices layered over one another in the warm air. Chan does not notice him. She has no reason to. He is part of the background of the market, the way the silk cotton trees are part of the background, present, unremarkable, not requiring her attention. She turns back to her jars. A new customer is approaching. Jorani folds another leaf bowl. The morning continues, and the man on the tree root makes a mark on his bark cloth, then another, then sits still for a long time, looking at something in the middle distance that he does not yet know how to draw. The sun climbs higher. The heat thickens. By the time it reaches its full midday weight, the market will begin to thin, the mats rolled up, the unsold goods gathered, the women rising from their places on the ground and dispersing along the paths between the mounds, each returning to her own compound, her own pond, her own platform and hearth. The market does not close so much as it evaporates, the way morning mist evaporates from the surface of the barays, gradually, without announcement, until the clearing is simply a clearing again, the beaten earth holding nothing but the faint impressions where the mats have been, and the lingering smell of prahok and fruit and wood smoke hanging in the air beneath the trees. Chan and Jorani are among the last to leave. There is no reason to rush. The afternoon will find its own shape, the fish traps to tend, the fermentation jars to check, the slow work of the household that continues, whether or not the market is open. They gather the unsold jars, fold the mat, collect the sack of rice that represents the morning's trade. Jorani lifts the basket. Chan adjusts the krama on her head. They turn back along the path, past the ponds where a few children are splashing in the shallows, past the mound where a woman is hanging a black cotton sampote on a line strung between two posts, past the place where the canal path curves toward the workshops, the compounds where stone is dressed and carved and finished, where the sound of chisels has been ringing all morning beneath the market's louder music, steady and persistent and patient, the sound of something being made to last. The sound of chisels on sandstone, that is the sound that greets Sovan as he returns along the canal path, the market clearing behind him, the bark cloth rolled under his arm. It is the sound of his life, really. He has been hearing it since before he could walk. His father struck stone. His uncle struck stone. His 3 older brothers at this very hour are striking stone 50 kilometers to the northeast on the slopes of Phnom Kulen, where the quarries bite into the mountainside in long stepped terraces. 50 quarries and more along the great embankment, feeding the canal network that carries the raw blocks south and west toward the temple sites. Sovan's family are quarriers. They select the stone, read its color and grain, know by sight and by the ring of a struck surface whether a block will hold together under the chisel or fracture along some hidden flaw. They cut it free with iron wedges driven into drilled holes. They lever it onto wooden rollers. They guide it down the embankment to the canal barges that will carry it slowly along hundreds of waterways to the place where it will become something else. That place is where Sovan now arrives. The workshop compound sits within the broader network of construction infrastructure that surrounds the Angkor Wat enclosure, not inside the temple precinct itself, but close enough that the central towers are visible above the tree line whenever he looks up from his work. The compound is a collection of open-sided shelters with thatched roofs, the ground beneath them covered in a fine, pale dust that is the residue of years of sandstone carving. It gets into everything: the folds of his sampot, the creases of his palms, the corners of his eyes. By the end of a working afternoon, the stone dust has turned his skin the color of the stone itself, so that he and the material he shapes become, briefly, the same substance. Around him, other carvers kneel or sit before blocks in various stages of completion. A man near the compound's entrance is finishing a lotus petal border, the repeating pattern that runs along the base of gallery walls, each petal identical to the last, each one requiring the same precise depth of cut and the same controlled curve of the chisel's path. Two younger workers across the compound are roughing out a Naga balustrade, the multi-headed serpent whose sinuous body will eventually line a temple causeway. These are the established patterns: lotus borders, Naga curves, the decorative vocabulary of the temples, solved and refined by generations of carvers before Sovan was born. A man learns them through repetition, through the slow accumulation of muscle memory, until the hands know the pattern better than the mind does, the same deep knowing that lives in Chan's fingers when she folds a leaf bowl. Sovan can carve a lotus border in his sleep. He very nearly has. But the work he has been given is not lotus borders. He finds his place in the compound, a flat stone surface near the western shelter where the afternoon light falls at an angle that suits close work, and unrolls the bark cloth. The studies he has made that morning lie before him. There are 6 of them now, from 6 different market visits, and in each one the same scene appears: the open clearing, the mats on the ground, the seated women with their goods arranged before them. In each one there is a figure near the center, a woman with jars, her hands extended, her body angled forward slightly as she works. The proportions are correct. The posture is anatomically plausible. The spatial relationships between figure and ground are faithful to what he observed. If a senior carver examined these studies against the standard of workshop accuracy, he would find nothing to criticize. And yet, Sovan spreads the 6 sheets side by side on the stone surface and looks at them the way one looks at a word one has written too many times, the word that is spelled correctly but has somehow ceased to mean anything. The woman in these drawings is a competent rendering of a seated female figure performing a task. She could be anyone. She could be a diagram in a pattern book, an illustration of the concept woman at market, the way a lotus border is an illustration of the concept lotus. She is general where the real woman is specific. She is still where the real woman is alive. He thinks about what he saw this morning, the way her right shoulder drops, not from injury or deformity, but from years of reaching into jars with that arm, the body shaped by its own repetition into something as specific as a river's bank. The way her thumb hooks the rim of the leaf bowl at a particular angle when she folds it, a gesture so practiced that it is invisible to her but visible, once noticed, as a signature, hers alone. The way a chisel mark on an unfinished stone is the signature of the carver who struck it. The way her weight shifts on the mat, a subtle redistribution of balance, when she turns to hand something to the girl beside her. None of this is in the drawings. The drawings show a woman sitting. They do not show this woman sitting. The senior carver passes through the compound in the late afternoon, as he does each day, making his circuit of the shelters. He pauses at Sovan Station. He is a man of administrative temperament. His concern is progress, schedule, the coordination of the workshop's output with the master architect's requirements. The project that has brought Sovan here is the outer gallery of the Bayon, the temple of King Jayavarman VII, whose bas-relief program is unprecedented in the history of the empire. For the first time, the galleries will depict not only gods and kings and battles, but the daily life of the people, the market, the fishermen, the cockfights, the board games, the woman giving birth under a shaded pavilion, 1,200 meters of carved stone showing the world as it actually is. The senior carver asks, in the tone of a man checking a box, whether the observation studies are progressing. Sovan says they are. The senior carver nods and moves on, already thinking about the Naga balustrade that must be finished by the end of the week. There is no further guidance. This is part of the difficulty, perhaps the heart of it. The lotus borders have templates. The Naga curves have templates. The battle scenes have iconographic conventions refined over centuries. How a king sits on his elephant, how a soldier holds his spear, how the defeated fall beneath the advancing line. But there is no template for a woman selling prahok. There is no convention for the angle of a thumb on a leaf bowl, for the drop of a shoulder shaped by 20 years of reaching into clay jars. No one has carved this before because no one has been asked to see it before. The Bayan Project has issued an instruction, depict the daily life of the common people, without providing a method for how to look at that life carefully enough to render it in stone. Sovan rolls the bark cloth studies and ties them. He cleans his chisels, a habit inherited from his quarrier father, who maintained his iron tools with the same care a fisherman maintains his nets, because the iron comes from far away, smelted by the K people in their clay furnaces on the forested plateaus, and every blade represents days of labor and charcoal and bellows work and heat. The tools are not disposable. They are participants in the work, and they deserve the respect of cleaning. He walks back along the canal path as the light begins to soften. The workshops fall behind him. Ahead, the towers of Angkor Wat rise above the tree line, their sandstone surfaces catching the last of the afternoon sun, and in this light they appear almost golden, the faint residue of a finish that once covered them entirely, so that the whole temple complex blazed like a second sun above the city's thatched rooftops. Where future visitors will see rough gray stone, Sovan sees warmth and fire. It is his city. He knows what it looks like. He simply does not yet know how to show it to anyone else. The canal water beside the path reflects the changing sky, pale amber, then rose, then a deepening violet as the sun drops below the tree line. A woman is washing cloth at the canal's edge, beating it against a flat stone with the same rhythm as the chisels in the workshop, a sound so common in this city that it registers as silence. Somewhere ahead, in one of the compounds clustered near the temple's outer wall, a woman is checking her fermentation jars, and a grandmother is settling onto a platform edge, and a girl is folding palm leaves into shapes that will not survive the century. He does not know their names. He does not know that the answer to his problem is sitting 3 mounds north of the canal path, watching the evening light change over a pond where fish rise to the surface to take the insects that come out at dusk. He only knows that the day is ending, and that tomorrow he will go back to the market clearing with his bark cloth and his stylus, and he will try again to draw what he sees, which is not yet what is there, but which is, each day, a little closer. The gap between the drawing and the woman is still wide, but it is narrower than it was, and the narrowing is not something he is doing on purpose. It is something that is happening to him, slowly, from the outside in, the way a canal fills with the monsoon, fed by something larger than his intention, something that has to do with the simple accumulation of hours spent watching one person do one thing with her whole self until the watching itself begins to change the watcher. The light fades, the cicadas begin, and in the compound where the grandmother tends the Nikta shrine, the evening is just beginning to unfold. The evening air has begun to cool, not truly cool, for the air in this city never fully releases its warmth, but the heat has softened from a weight to a presence, from something that presses against the skin to something that merely rests upon it. The light over the compound has turned the color of old honey, amber and thick, pooling in the spaces between the house mounds and catching on the surface of the pond where the last of the day's washing water has settled into stillness. A few pale insects have already begun to drift above the water. The frogs will start soon. On the platform of the house, 3 women occupy the evening in their own ways. Chan sits at the platform's far edge, legs folded beneath her hands working a bamboo fish trap that has developed a gap in its weave. She holds the trap in her lap, threading a new strip of bamboo through the lattice with the same unhurried precision she brings to everything, her fingers finding the tension by feel rather than by sight, pulling the strip taut, testing it, adjusting. She is present but absorbed. Her breathing is steady. She could do this in her sleep, and perhaps she nearly does, because the fish trap is not a problem to be solved, but a task to be completed. And the difference between the two is the difference between tension and rhythm. Jorani sits closer to the center of the platform, near the post where the thatched roof is lowest and the air moves through the gap beneath the eaves. She has just finished an afternoon of pressing palm leaf sheaves, and her hands still carry the smooth stone feeling of that work, the particular ache between the thumb and forefinger that comes from gripping the polishing stone for hours. She is resting, but not idly. She is listening. Leap has arranged herself against the platform's central post, her back resting against the worn timber, her legs extended in front of her with the careful deliberation of a woman whose knees have strong opinions about the order in which things should be done. She has not descended the ladder since the middle of the afternoon. The heat today was heavy, and the 12 rungs demand a negotiation she was not willing to undertake a second time. So she stayed. She sorted dried herbs into cloth bundles. She mended a tear in her sleeping mat. She watched the light change over the pond. And now, with the evening settling around the compound like water filling a basin, she is talking, not telling a story precisely. Leap does not tell stories the way a storyteller does, with shape and sequence and the expectation of an audience. She talks the way rain falls, in continuous uneven rhythm, some portions heavier than others, the whole of it moving in a direction that only becomes clear once you have been standing in it for a while. She is telling Jirani about the silk cotton tree, not the tree itself. Jirani can see the tree. It stands at the edge of the pond, broad-trunked and ancient, its buttress roots spreading across the ground like the fingers of a hand pressed flat against the earth. Jirani has known this tree since before she could walk. She has climbed it. She has collected its seed pods. She has watched it lose its leaves in the dry season and regain them with the rains. The tree is not news. What Leap is telling her about is the Neek Ta of the tree, the spirit who resides at its eastern root, where the weathered stone fragment sits amid a permanent scatter of incense ash and dried flower petals. This Neek Ta has preferences. Leap knows them the way she knows the preferences of her own body, through decades of daily attention, through the accumulated evidence of what works and what does not, through the inherited knowledge of her own mother and her mother's mother, each of whom tended this same compound and this same tree, and learned, through practice and error and the occasional sharp correction from misfortune, what the spirit of this place requires. The offering should be placed at the eastern root, not the southern root, where the stone fragment rested for 2 seasons after a storm shifted it. Those were the seasons when the pond fish sickened and the youngest pig stopped eating. And it was not until Leap's mother moved the stone back to the eastern root and offered a double portion of rice and incense for 7 consecutive mornings that things returned to normal. The incense should face east when lit. The rice should be from the previous evening's meal, not the morning's, because the Neek Ta of this tree does not eat in daylight, or at least does not wish to be seen eating, and to offer fresh morning rice is to make the offering about the giver's convenience rather than the spirit's nature. These are not rules written anywhere. They exist in Leap's memory, and before that in her mother's memory, and before that in a chain of women's knowledge reaching back further than anyone can trace, back to the time when someone first cleared this ground for a house mound and a pond, and in clearing it acknowledged the spirit of the place, and in acknowledging it created an obligation that has been maintained generation by generation, incense stick by incense stick, through every monsoon and every drought and every shift in the official religion proclaimed by whatever god-king currently sits on the golden throne. Leap does not frame it this way. She does not talk about tradition or obligation or the deep continuity of animist practice beneath the surface of empire. She talks about the stone and the tree and the rice and the incense. She talks about the time her mother forgot the evening offering before a journey and twisted her ankle on the first day of walking. She talks about the specific angle at which the incense stick should be pressed into the ground, not straight up, which is for temple offerings to the great gods, but slightly tilted, which is for the Neek Ta, because the Neek Ta are not above you, they are beside you. They are neighbors, and you do not address a neighbor by looking over their head. Jirani listens. She does not ask questions because these are not the kind of teachings that invite questions. They are the kind that invite absorption, the slow saturation of knowledge through proximity and repetition, not all at once, but through successive immersions, each one deepening the color, until the knowledge is no longer something added, but something that belongs to the fiber itself. She has heard some of this before. She has heard parts of it many times. But tonight there is a quality in Leap's telling that is different, and Jirani senses it without being able to name it. Leap is being specific, more specific than usual. The eastern route, not just the roots. 7 mornings, not just several. The angle of the incense, not just the placement. She is tightening the weave of her knowledge, pulling the loose threads into fixed positions, as though preparing the information for a transfer that must be reliable because it may not be repeated. Her body is stiff and her knees are unreliable, but her mind is as clear as the pond water after the sediment settles. She is not anxious. She is thorough, the way she has always been thorough, the way her mother was thorough before her, and the thoroughness this evening carries its own quiet weight. Giorani feels this. She does not look at her grandmother differently. That would acknowledge the urgency, and acknowledging it would make it real in a way that neither of them wants. Instead, she listens more carefully. She lets her hands rest in her lap. She watches Leap's hands as they demonstrate the folding of an offering leaf, the particular way the broad leaf is creased along its central vein, the way the edges are tucked to form a shallow cup that will hold a small mound of rice without spilling. Leap's fingers are still sure in this work. The joints that resist the ladder have no difficulty with the leaf. This is knowledge that lives in the hands, and the hands are the last part of the body to forget. At the platform's edge, Chan hears all of this. Her fingers continue threading the bamboo strip through the fish trap's weave. She does not look up. She does not contribute because she does not need to. She already knows these practices, has known them since she was Giorani's age, learned them on this same platform in the same amber evening light. But she registers the urgency in her mother's voice. She registers the tightening specificity, and she says nothing because the thing Leap is afraid of, not death itself, but the gap that death will leave in the chain of knowledge. The possibility that the Nik-Ta's preferences will be forgotten or approximated or simplified into something that no longer works is not something Chan can address with words. It is a fear that can only be answered by Giorani's hands folding the leaf correctly, by Giorani's feet carrying the offering to the eastern root, by Giorani's memory holding the 7 mornings and the tilted incense and the evening rice. The answer to Leap's fear is not reassurance, it is continuity. And continuity is not a thing you can promise. It is a thing you can only perform morning after morning for the rest of your life. The evening deepens. The frogs have begun their chorus at the pond's edge, and somewhere in the distance, from the direction of one of the temple precincts, across the canal and beyond the tree line, the faint sound of chanting carries through the humid air. It is the sound of monks in their evening recitation, the Pali syllables rising and falling in the cadence that marks the day's transition from labor to rest. Leap does not pray in Pali. Her prayers, if they are prayers, are in Khmer, murmured to a stone at the base of a tree, and they are older than the Sanskrit that came before the Pali, older than the god-kings and the golden spires, older than the canals and the barays and the great temples themselves. They belong to the first layer of belief in this place, the layer that was here when the land was cleared and the spirits were first acknowledged, and they will be here in some form, tended by some woman on some platform, long after the golden towers have shed their gold and the jungle has begun its slow reclamation. Leap sleeps first. She always sleeps first now. The platform's surface is hard beneath the sleeping mat, but her body has been negotiating with hard surfaces for 68 years and has reached an arrangement that, while not comfortable, is at least familiar. She turns onto her side, one arm beneath her head, and her breathing changes within minutes. not the sudden drop into sleep of the young, but the gradual subsidence of a woman whose body knows how to release the day in stages, letting go of the knees first, then the hips, then the shoulders, then the thoughts. Jorani sleeps next, curled on her mat a body's width from her grandmother, close enough to hear the older woman's breathing and calibrate her own against it. Between them, in the dark, the knowledge of the Nikta settles, the eastern root, the tilted incense, the evening rice, the 7 mornings, the folded leaf. It has moved from one body to another, not perfectly, not completely, but enough for now. Chan is last awake. She has set the finished fish trap aside. She sits at the platform's edge, her feet dangling over the side, and listens to the sounds of the compound, the pigs shifting and grunting beneath the house, the soft plash of a fish turning in the pond, the cicadas threading their endless high note through the darkness. From the canal path, the sound of someone walking home late, footsteps in the dust, unhurried, solitary. The chanting from the temple precinct has ceased. The compound is quiet. She thinks of nothing in particular, or of everything at once: the morning's market, the fish traps mended weave, the prahok jars that need checking tomorrow, her mother's voice reciting the Nikta's preferences with a precision that means she is counting the lessons she has left. Chan does not try to hold these thoughts. She lets them move through her the way the evening air moves through the gap beneath the eaves, present, then gone, replaced by the next thing and the next. This is how she has always been, a woman who meets what comes and tends what needs tending, and does not ask the work to be anything other than what it is. The night settles over the Angkor Wat enclosure, over the grid of house mounds and ponds and canal paths, over the workshops where stone dust coats every surface, over the market clearing where tomorrow's mats will be spread again on the same ground. Somewhere in the darkness, on another mound in another compound, a man is lying awake with bark cloth studies rolled beside his sleeping mat, thinking about the gap between what he draws and what he sees. He does not know that 3 mounds north, a grandmother has just finished passing something invisible from her hands to a girl's hands, something no chisel can capture and no stone can hold, something that will outlast the temples not because it is carved, but because it is carried, body to body, morning to morning, in a chain that does not break so long as someone remembers which root to place the offering at, and which direction the incense should face, and why the rice should come from the evening meal and not the morning's. The darkness is full and warm. The frogs continue, and in the space between sleep and waking the compound breathes. 3 women on a platform above the earth, the Nikta stone patient at the tree's eastern root, the pond holding its small population of fish and reflected stars, the whole arrangement sustained by the oldest kind of knowledge there is, the kind that is never written down and never needs to be, so long as someone is still listening. Days pass at Angkor the way water moves through the canal system, steadily, without announcement, each morning resembling the one before it, until you realize the current has carried you somewhere new. The dry season holds. The sky is pale and enormous above the tree line, and every morning, before the market fills, a man walks the path from the workshop compound to the clearing within the Angkor Wat enclosure, carrying a roll of bark cloth under his arm and a bamboo case of styluses tucked into his waistband, and takes his place on the ground several paces from where the women will soon spread their mats. Sovan has been coming here long enough now that his presence has become part of the landscape, no more remarkable than the silk cotton tree at the clearing's western edge, or the ox cart ruts in the dried mud, or the particular stone where the canal path turns toward the pond cluster. The market women do not watch him. He is simply there, the way the heat is there, the way the cicadas are there. A man sitting on the ground with bark cloth spread on a flat stone surface, making marks with a stylus while the morning trade unfolds around him. He arrives today before Chan, which is unusual. He sets his bark cloth on the stone and prepares his stylus, a sharpened length of bamboo, its tip hardened in fire, and he waits. The market fills around him in its customary order. Bofa, the cloth seller, arrives first, as she always does, unfolding her cotton kramas and simple sampots on her mat with the unhurried deliberation of a woman who has arranged the same goods in the same way for more years than she would care to count. Two women with baskets of watermelons and sugarcane settle near the eastern edge. A vendor who sells leaf-wrapped parcels of steamed rice and mung beans takes her usual position beside a thatched parasol. The sounds layer themselves, voices, the scrape of baskets on packed earth, the lowing of an ox somewhere along the canal road. The smells arrive, prahok from a dozen different vendors, sharp and deep and fungal beneath the cleaner scents of fresh banana leaf and wood smoke. Then Chan appears on the path with the prahok jars in their cloth-padded basket balanced on her head, Jorani walking beside her with the leaf materials and the earthenware measuring cups. Sovan has seen this arrival many times now. He has drawn it many times. He could sketch it from memory, the angle of Chan's neck beneath the basket, the placement of her feet on the uneven ground, the way Jorani carries the lighter load against her hip with one arm. He knows these shapes. He has committed them to bark cloth often enough that his hand could reproduce them without his eyes. But today, as he watches Chan lower the basket from her head and begin to arrange her jars on the mat, something catches, a small deviation in the sequence, so slight that no one who had not been watching her daily would notice. She opens a different jar first, not the large one with the oldest, most pungent prahok, which is always the first she presents to her earliest customers. Today she opens a smaller jar, one he has not seen before, and lifts the clay lid and holds it for a moment, not offering it to anyone, not setting it down, just holding it and breathing the steam that rises from the paste inside. She nods once to herself. Then she seals it again and sets it to the side and proceeds with the usual order. It is nothing. It is a woman checking the progress of a fermentation batch. And yet Sovan finds himself staring at the bark cloth where he has drawn Chan's morning arrival a dozen times, and he understands, with a small, quiet shock, like the click of a latch, that he has been watching her long enough to recognize when the pattern varies. He has memorized the rhythm of her labor without intending to. He does not know her name. He does not know what the smaller jar contains, or why she checked it today and not yesterday. But the pattern he has been trying to impose on his studies, the idealized market vendor, the generalized seated woman, has been replaced, somewhere in the repetition of mornings, by the actual pattern of a specific life, not the woman he imagined drawing, the woman who is there. He puts the stylus to the bark cloth, and for the first time, instead of composing the figure, arranging her limbs in the relationship he intends, angling her head to the tilt he has planned, he simply records what he sees. The right shoulder drops lower than the left when she reaches into the jar. The thumb hooks the rim of the leaf bowl at a particular angle, not the elegant angle he has been giving it, but a practical one, a working grip. Her weight on the mat shifts when she turns to hand something to Jorani, not a symmetrical rotation, but an asymmetrical lean, favoring the left hip, the hip that has borne the basket every morning for years. The drawing that emerges is rougher than his earlier studies, less precise, less finished, and it is the first one that breathes. The morning continues. The market fills to its peak. The sound of women's voices in negotiation rises and falls in overlapping waves, and Sovan draws, not Chan alone now, but the wider scene. The vendor with the watermelons, cross-legged on her mat, using a short blade to section the fruit for customers who want a taste before committing their rice measures. Bofa the cloth seller, holding a krama up to the light so a buyer can see the weaves, the cotton fabric filtering the morning sun into a warm, amber-tinged glow. A child asleep on a mat behind its mother's baskets, curled like a prawn in the heat. He is deep in this work, really in it, the way he used to get lost in a lotus border pattern at the workshop, the world narrowing to the stylus tip and the surface and the emerging line, when a figure appears at Chan's mat that he has not seen before. A man, lean and hard-armed, with hands the color of charcoal, not the dull gray of stone dust which Sovan knows well from his own skin. This is a blacker stain, deeper, worked into the creases of the knuckles and the beds of the nails. The forearms carry burn scars, not recent, but accumulated, layered over each other in a geography of old heat. The man crouches at the mat's edge with the easy fold of someone whose legs are accustomed to crouching at a furnace mouth. He is Kwe. Sovan recognizes the markers without needing to be told, the charcoal staining, the burn patterns, the particular musculature of the forearms and shoulders that comes from working bellows made of buffalo hide, pumping air through clay tuyere pipes into furnaces hot enough to liquefy iron slag. The K hold the knowledge of iron smelting the way scribes hold the knowledge of Sanskrit, as a specialized inheritance passed within their communities, not shared outward. The Khmer do not smelt iron. The Kwai do. Everyone knows this. No one much thinks about it. The man, Rith, though Sovan does not know his name, buys prahok from Chan with an easy familiarity that tells Sovan this is a regular transaction. Chan asks after his work. Rith says something about the heat and the quality of the latest charcoal shipment. She portions his prahok into a leaf bowl and adds an extra measure. Not asked for, not acknowledged, simply given the way she always does for him because she always does. He takes it. He rises. He walks back toward the canal path, and Sovan watches him go and feels something turn over quietly in his mind. The iron in his chisel. He has held it every day of his working life. He has never once thought about where it came from, not the mine, not the furnace, not the hands that smelted the ore and forged the blade. Without that iron, his chisel would not exist. Without the chisel, the stone would remain uncarved. Without the carving, but that direction leads to the temples themselves, and the temples would not exist without iron tools, and the iron tools would not exist without the Kwei, and the Kwei would not eat without prahok, and the prahok would not reach the market without women like Chan portioning it into leaf bowls every morning before the sun clears the tree line. He is looking at the base of the structure, The invisible foundation, the daily labor of people whose names appear in no inscription, whose faces decorate no temple wall, whose lives are sustained by fermented fish and forged iron and the steady, unremarkable work of hands that never stop. The assignment he was given, observation studies of daily life, preparatory sketches for a gallery program unlike anything attempted before, has begun to feel less like a task and more like a question. What is worth carving? What deserves the permanence of stone? His earlier answer was simple: whatever the senior carver assigns. But the senior carver is not here. No one is checking his work. No one can tell him what he is doing wrong or right, or whether the distinction even matters. He draws Rith from memory, the crouch, the charcoal hands, the forearms. He draws Chan again, the extra measure in the leaf bowl, the absence of ceremony in the giving. The figures are looser now, less composed, more present. Late in the morning, as the market begins its slow midday dissolution, the mats rolling up, the baskets being lifted, the vendors dispersing along the paths, Jorani notices him. She has been aware of the man with the bark cloth for some time, the way one is aware of a tree that has always been at the path's edge. But today she looks at what he has drawn. She steps close enough to see the bark cloth surface, and she looks with the direct, unbuffered curiosity of a girl who handles these surfaces every afternoon, who soaks and beats and dries them and knows what a finished palm leaf manuscript looks like, and what a carver's study looks like, and can tell the difference between a man reproducing a pattern and a man trying to see something new. She tells him that one of his drawings of a seated woman looks stiff. She says the figure seems to be waiting for something instead of just sitting. She says this the way she might say the rice has cooked too long, as an observation, not a judgment, delivered without particular weight and immediately followed by her turning back to the stack of leaf bowls she is gathering for the walk home. She does not know she has said the most useful thing anyone will say to him during the entire course of this project. She has simply described what she saw on the bark cloth, and what she saw was true. Sovan stares at the drawing she indicated. She is right. The figure is held in suspension. It is posed. It is waiting for the viewer's attention, for the composition to justify it, for the scene to explain why it is there. That is what his training taught him. Every figure in a carving serves the narrative. Every body is oriented toward the central action. Every line leads the eye. But Chan, the real Chan, the one he has been watching, she does not wait. She does not orient toward anything. She simply occupies her mat, her jars, her leaf bowls, her mourning. There is no gap between her sitting and her being. She is not between actions. She is in the action. The prach does not pause to be noticed. The hands do not arrange themselves to be seen. He does not solve the problem today. He rolls the bark cloth, tucks the styluses back into their bamboo case, and walks the canal path toward the workshop in the noon heat. But the problem has changed shape. It is no longer a question of technical rendering, of proportion, of angle, of line weight. It is a question of presence. How do you carve into stone the quality of a person who is not performing but simply living? How do you render, in a medium that will outlast everything organic, the thing that makes the organic world alive? The canal water moves beside him, slow and brown and flecked with leaf debris. Somewhere behind him, Chan and Jorani are walking the opposite direction, the empty jars lighter now, the morning's work completed, the afternoon stretching ahead with its own demands. They do not look back toward the man on the canal path. They are already thinking about what comes next. The bark cloth preparation, the fish trap, the grandmother waiting on the platform with her herbs and her stiff knees and her patient, urgent knowledge. And Sovan carries the morning's drawings toward the workshop, where the sound of chisels on sandstone rises through the afternoon heat like the voice of the city itself, steady and percussive and unceasing, shaping stone into something that will remember what the wood and the thatch and the leaf bowls cannot. The afternoon heat gathers beneath the thatched roof like something with weight, pressing down on the compound, slowing the air to a standstill. The chickens have gone quiet beneath the house, settled into the dust in the deepest shade they can find. Even the pigs have stopped their restless rooting and lie on their sides, breathing in slow, deliberate heaves. The canal water, visible through the gaps in the tree line, barely moves. The silk cotton tree beside the pond holds its leaves perfectly still, as though the entire landscape has paused between breaths. Giorani works in this stillness. She has carried her materials to the shaded ground beneath the house platform, the space between the stilts where the air is fractionally cooler and where the packed earth provides a firm, level surface for the work her hands know almost as well as they know the folding of leaf bowls and the measuring of rice. The palm leaves arrived this morning in a loose bundle, carried by a boy from one of the temple stores. Fan palm leaves, broad and stiff, the pale green of new growth already beginning to dry at the edges. Giorani sorts through them, running her thumb along each leaf's central spine, feeling for cracks, for brittleness, for the subtle variations in thickness that will determine whether a leaf can hold the pressure of a stylus or will split under the first inscribed line. The leaves that pass her inspection go into a shallow earthenware basin filled with water drawn from the household pond. They will soak until the fibers soften, until the leaf becomes supple enough to accept whatever is written upon it without resistance. While the leaves soak, she turns to the bark cloth. This is the heavier work, the work that fills the compound with its particular rhythm. A section of inner bark, stripped earlier from a mulberry trunk by someone else's hands, someone in the network of suppliers who feed materials to the temple workshops, lies folded on the beaten earth before her. She unfolds it, spreads it flat, and reaches for the wooden mallet. The first strike sends a muted, fibrous sound through the compound, not the sharp crack of stone on stone that carries from the carving workshops, but something softer, more organic, like the sound of a palm hitting water. She strikes again, again. The rhythm settles into her shoulders, her wrists, the base of her spine. The bark fibers begin to spread beneath the mallet's impact, thinning and flattening. The tight weave of the inner bark loosening into something that resembles cloth. She turns the piece, strikes again from a different angle, watching the way the fibers respond, which sections spread evenly, which resist, which need to be soaked again before they will yield. The mallet's rhythm is almost musical, a slow, percussive pulse that carries across the compound in the afternoon quiet, reaching the platform above where Leap sits sorting dried herbs into small cloth bundles. The grandmother does not help with this work anymore. Her fingers, which were once among the most skilled bark cloth preparers in the enclosure, have grown unreliable in their grip. The mallet slips, the pressure is uneven, the fibers tear instead of spreading. She does not speak of this loss, she simply stopped doing it, the way one stops walking a path that has become impassable, without announcement, without ceremony, with only the quiet rearrangement of daily tasks to fill the space where the old competence used to live. Now she sorts herbs, she mends cloth, she sits close enough to Jirani to offer the occasional observation. The bark needs more water, the mallet angle is too steep, but the hands that do the work are her granddaughter's hands, and both of them know that this transfer is permanent. Jirani soaks the beaten bark in a second basin, lets it rest, then spreads it between two flat stones to press. The pressing takes time. She weights the top stone with a river cobble and leaves it, turning back to the palm leaves, which have softened enough to handle. She lifts each leaf from the water, lets it drip, and lays it on a smooth section of earth that she has swept clean, not in direct sun, never in direct sun, which makes the leaf brittle and prone to cracking at the fold. In the shade, where the drying is slow and even, where the moisture leaves the fiber gradually, the way a held breath releases. She smooths each damp leaf with a polished river stone, working from the center spine outward, pressing the surface flat, coaxing out the small wrinkles and ridges that would catch a stylus point and send a line skidding off its intended path. The stone is warm in her hand, worn to a comfortable curve by use, not only her use, but the use of whoever held it before her, and before that. It is one of the few objects in the household that carries the imprint of hands other than the family's own. She does not think about this. She simply uses it the way one uses a path or a word without wondering who made it smooth. The work has a quality of quiet devotion that she does not name. She is not preparing manuscripts. That is the scribe's work, and the scribes are men trained in the temple precincts, literate in both the old Khmer script and the Sanskrit formulas that structure the empire's religious and administrative records. Jirani cannot read what will be written on the surfaces she prepares. She knows only the materials, their textures, their tolerances, their needs. She knows that a palm leaf manuscript, when finished, will be a thing of careful beauty. The leaves cut to uniform size, stacked, threaded through with cord, the inscribed lines dark against the pale surface. She knows that a bark cloth sheet, properly beaten and dried, will accept charcoal and plant-based inks without bleeding, holding the lines of a carver's observation study or a scribe's preliminary draft with enough fidelity to be useful. She also knows, though she would not frame it in these terms, that the surfaces she prepares are temporary. She has seen old palm leaf manuscripts in the temple stores, their edges softened by humidity, their inscriptions fading, the fibers beginning to separate along the fold lines. She has seen bark cloth go to mold in a single monsoon season if stored improperly, the dark spots spreading across the surface like bruises, consuming the fiber from within. Everything she makes is in negotiation with the climate, the hot air that presses down on the compound, the humidity that thickens before the monsoon, the rains that will come. All of these are forces that her work must accommodate, and that will eventually win. A palm leaf prepared today, inscribed tomorrow, stored with care, might last 20 years. 50 if kept in the driest conditions the temple stores can provide. A century at the very outside. Then it will return to the earth that grew it. The rice inventory it recorded, the personnel register, the list of dancers assigned to a particular temple festival, the offering schedule for a minor shrine, all of it gone. The stone endures. Jorani knows this too in the practical way of someone who handles both materials. She has carried bark cloth sheets to the workshop compound where the carvers work, delivering studies and templates that the artisans will translate from perishable sketch into permanent relief. She has seen the carver's chisels bite into sandstone, the slow accumulation of cuts that transform a flat surface into a figure, a scene, a world, rendered in a medium that does not soften in humidity, does not mold in the monsoon, does not return to the earth within a generation. She has held the bark cloth studies that precede the stone, the drawings made by men like the quiet one she has noticed at the market, the man with the stylus and the flat stone surface who sits apart from the buyers and sellers and looks at the world with the particular intensity of someone trying to hold it still long enough to record it. She had recognized something in his drawings when she glanced at them, not their quality, which she has no training to judge, but their intention. Most of the bark cloth studies she delivers to the workshop are clean, efficient, almost mechanical. The established patterns of lotus borders, naga balustrades, decorative friezes that repeat with minor variations across every temple surface in the enclosure. The quiet man's studies were different. They were messier. They had the look of someone struggling with something, working the same figure over and over, trying to get at something that the line kept missing. She had told him his figure looked stiff. She had not thought about it much afterward. It was simply what she saw. Now, smoothing the last palm leaf flat with the river stone, she thinks of it again, not the man, but the problem, the way a bark cloth drawing of a person can look like a person and still not feel like one. She has seen this in the workshop templates, figures that are proportionally correct, anatomically complete, and somehow absent, as though the surface they are drawn on has captured the shape but not the weight, as though the person depicted has no relationship to the ground beneath them or the air around them. She does not have words for what makes a drawing alive. She has only the sensation of the river stone in her hand, the feel of the damp palm leaf yielding under pressure, the knowledge, held in her fingers, not in her thoughts, that the material has its own logic, its own grain, and that working with that grain produces something different from working against it. The stone does not impose smoothness on the leaf. It finds the smoothness that the leaf is already capable of and draws it out. Above her on the platform, Leap has finished sorting her herbs. The small cloth bundles are arranged in a row: turmeric, galangal, a bitter green leaf whose name exists only in Khmer and whose use Leap learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. Leap's hands rest on her knees. Her eyes are half closed. She is not asleep, but drifting in the particular alertness of the elderly who rest without fully releasing their hold on the waking world. The mallet lies beside the bark cloth basin. The palm leaves dry in their careful rows. The pressed bark rests between its stones, slowly surrendering its moisture to the afternoon air. Everything Jorani has made today will be used, inscribed, consulted, filed in the temple stores, and eventually consumed by the very climate that grew the trees from which it came. This is not a tragedy she contemplates. It is simply the nature of the work, the way prahok is made to be eaten, the way rice is grown to be harvested, the way the incense at the Nikta shrine burns down to ash and is replaced the next morning with a fresh stick. The work that lasts is not the work that matters most. The work that matters most is the work that must be done again. The afternoon tilts toward evening. The heat relents by the smallest of degrees. The first stirring of air moves through the compound, not a breeze exactly, but a loosening, as though the atmosphere itself is unclenching after hours of compression. Jorani gathers the dried palm leaves into a neat stack, ties them with a strip of cotton cord, and sets them in the basket she will carry to the temple stores tomorrow. She checks the bark cloth between the stones. It is not ready yet, still too damp at the center. She leaves it. It will be ready by morning. The sky to the west has begun to change. Not the dramatic colors of a monsoon sunset, those are still weeks away, but a softening, a deepening of the blue into something that carries the first faint suggestion of amber. The canal water catches this change and holds it, the surface dimming as the angle of light shifts, the reflections of the house mounds and the palm crowns growing longer, more indistinct, as though the world is slowly trading its precision for something gentler, something that blurs the edges between one thing and the next. The monsoon does not arrive like a guest at a door. It arrives the way sleep arrives, in stages, in suggestions, in a series of small surrenders before the full weight of it settles over everything. For days before the first true rain, the sky rehearses. Clouds mass along the southern horizon in the late afternoon, towering formations that darken from white to gray to the color of wet slate, and then dissolve again by evening without having released a single drop. The air thickens. The cicadas, whose metallic hiss has been the constant backdrop of the dry months, grow louder, more insistent, as though they too can feel the pressure building in the atmosphere and are calling it down. The household ponds, which have spent the dry season slowly receding from their banks, hold still, neither filling nor emptying, waiting. Chan reads these signs the way a scribe reads an inscription. She has been watching monsoons for 25 years from this compound, and before that, she watched them from her mother's compound on the far side of the enclosure, and before that she watched them as a child from the elevated platform of a house that no longer stands. Leap taught her to read the sky, not through theory but through accumulated observation, season by season, the knowledge depositing in her body like sediment at the bottom of a canal. The prahok jars need checking. This is the first task of the pre-monsoon weeks, and Chan performs it with the focused attention of someone inspecting something irreplaceable. The jars sit in a sheltered corner of the compound beneath a thatched overhang that Chan reinforced last dry season with extra palm fronds. Each jar is sealed with a clay lid weighted with a stone, and beneath the lid the contents are doing their slow, invisible work. The salt drawing moisture from the fish, the bacteria transforming flesh into paste, the fermentation producing the sharp fungal smell that rises when Chan lifts each lid to inspect the progress. The oldest jars have been sealed for nearly 2 years now. Their contents have deepened into something almost savory. The smell rounded and warm, closer to aged cheese than raw fish. The paste itself darkened to a deep amber brown. These are the valuable ones, the jars that will command the highest exchange in rice at the market. the ones that Chan portions out in smaller quantities because the flavor is concentrated and a little goes further. The newest jars, sealed only a few months ago, are sharper, more pungent, still in the early stages of their transformation. They need the most protection from the coming rain. Water entering a fermentation jar ruins everything, dilutes the salt concentration, introduces the wrong bacteria, turns careful preservation into rot. Chan checks each seal, presses the clay lids tighter, adjusts the weight stones, and repositions the jars so that even if rain drives sideways beneath the overhang, the seals will not be breached. Jorani helps. She moves the heavier jars while Chan directs their placement, the two of them working with the same wordless coordination they bring to the market mat. Leap watches from the platform above, her knees drawn up, her back against the house post. She has offered to help and been told, gently but unmistakably, that the jar checking requires bending and lifting that her body no longer performs without cost. She accepts this without argument. It is not a surrender. It is the same strategic conservation she applies to everything now, spending her energy where it matters most, withholding it where others can carry the load. Her contribution to the monsoon preparation is different. She has been watching the silk cotton tree by the pond, observing the way its leaves have begun to turn, reading the Niktia's mood through the subtle language of the tree that houses it. She will make a larger offering tomorrow, a full portion of rice, not the usual fragment, and a spray of jasmine from the bush that grows at the compound's western edge. The monsoon is a time when the spirits are active, when the water that rises through the canal system carries with it the energies of the wider landscape, and the nikta of a household pond must be acknowledged with particular care as the boundaries between wet and dry, between the spirit world and the human world, grow thinner. The first real rain comes 3 days later, in the late afternoon. It begins as a darkening so rapid that Chan, sitting at her market mat in the late morning, watches the light change between one customer and the next. The clouds that have been rehearsing for weeks finally commit. They do not build slowly from the horizon. They seem to materialize directly overhead, as though the sky has been holding them in reserve and has now released them all at once. The air pressure drops. The market women begin gathering their goods with practiced efficiency, folding mats, covering baskets, tucking cloth-wrapped bundles under their arms. There is no panic. This is a city that has organized itself around water for 400 years. Everyone knows the protocol. Chan and Jorani pack the prahok jars into their carrying baskets, wrap the leaf materials in cotton cloth, and begin the walk back to the compound along the canal path. The rain catches them halfway home. It falls not in drops but in sheets, a solid curtain of water that turns the packed earth path to mud in moments and reduces visibility to the length of a house mound. The canal beside the path begins to rise visibly, the water darkening as it churns with the sediment kicked up from the bottom. Chan walks steadily, her bare feet finding the path by memory rather than sight, the prahok basket balanced on her head, her free hand reaching back to grip Jorani's wrist, not because Jorani needs guidance, but because the contact is itself a kind of navigation, a way of moving through the world as a single body rather than two separate ones. They reach the compound drenched and laughing. It is the particular laughter of people who have been expecting something for weeks and have finally been proven right. Not relief exactly, but satisfaction, the pleasure of a prediction confirmed. Leap is dry on the platform above, having had the good sense to stay home, and she watches them climb the ladder with the expression of a woman who told them to leave the market early and is too dignified to say so. The rain continues through the afternoon, drumming on the thatch in a rhythm that shifts between urgent and steady like breathing. The sound fills the house. It fills the space between the stilts below, where the pigs huddle against the central post and the chickens have crowded onto the highest crossbeam they can reach, their feathers puffed against the damp. It fills the canal, which by evening has risen a full handspan above its dry season mark, the water moving faster now, carrying leaves and small branches and the occasional flower torn from a vine by the force of the downpour. Chan knows what is happening beyond the compound, beyond the canal path, across the whole breathing infrastructure of the city. The monsoon does not merely water Angkor, it remakes it. She has watched it happen every year of her life. The Tonle Sap, the great lake that feeds the empire's fisheries and fills its canals, beginning its annual reversal as the swollen Mekong pushes water back upstream into the lake basin. Over the coming weeks, she knows, the lake will expand to 5 times its dry season surface area. The water will rise so high that even tall trees along the shore will be submerged to their tips. Families living near the lake's edge will be moving their households to higher ground, as they always do, carrying their belongings and their livestock to the far side of the hills. But here, within the engineered landscape of Greater Angkor, the water is not simply endured, it is managed. Chan can see the evidence from her own compound, the canal beside the path rising in its banks, the water moving with purpose, channeled toward the great barays, the enormous artificial reservoirs, some of them kilometers long, that receive the monsoon surplus and hold it. The spillways downstream, built with laterite blocks cut with interlocking grooves so that the torrential force of water cannot dislodge them, control the flow from reservoir to canal, from canal to rice paddy, from paddy to the household pond where her own fish swim in water that the system delivered. The maintenance of all this is the permanent occupation of hundreds of workers, men and women she passes on the canal path, knee-deep in the infrastructure, clearing silt from canal mouths, monitoring water levels, repairing the earthen banks where the current has eroded them. They work through the monsoon itself, in the rain, because the system does not pause for weather. It is the system that makes weather survivable. Chan sees these workers when she walks the canal path. She has always seen them. They are as much a part of the landscape as the palm trees and the house mounds. But she has never had reason to think about what they do in the way that she thinks about what she does. They maintain the water. She maintains the prahok. Both are forms of management, of anticipation, adjustment, and patience applied to systems that are always in motion. The water workers and the market women share a quality that neither group would think to name, the competence of people whose expertise is so embedded in their daily rhythm that it has become invisible even to themselves. Along the canal path one afternoon, between downpours, Chan notices the man with the bark cloth. He is walking in the opposite direction, his studies tucked under his arm in a wrapping of oiled cloth to protect them from the rain. His sandals are caked with the red-brown mud of the canal bank. He is looking at the water maintenance workers the way he used to look at the market, with that quality of sustained, almost bewildered attention, as though he is seeing something that he has looked at 1,000 times and is only now beginning to understand. Chan does not know his name. She registers him the way she registers any regular feature of the canal path, a familiar tree, a particular bend in the water, a stone that marks the halfway point between market and compound. He is part of the landscape. She walks past. The rain that night is the heaviest yet. It begins after dark and builds through the hours, the drumming on the thatch intensifying until the sound fills the entire house, until the space inside the thatched walls feels like the interior of a drum itself. Leap sleeps first, curled on her mat with a cotton cloth drawn over her shoulders against the damp that the rain brings into the air. Jorani sleeps next, her breathing slowing into the deep, unhurried rhythm of someone young enough to sleep through anything. Chan is last. She lies on her back on the sleeping platform, listening. The water level in the pond will be higher by morning. The canal will be running faster. The prahok jars under the overhang will need checking again at first light. Even the best seal can fail if the rain is heavy enough and the wind pushes water beneath the thatch. These are the thoughts of a woman whose life is organized around water and salt and time, the three elements that preserve fish, that fill canals, that grow rice, that sustain a city spread across 1,000 square kilometers of engineered landscape. She does not think of it in these terms. She thinks of the jars, the seal, the morning. The rain drums on the thatch above her, steady now, no longer surging. The rhythm settling into something constant and enveloping, a sound that wraps around the house the way water wraps around the stilts below. And somewhere across the enclosure, in the workshop compound where the stone dust has turned to paste in the wet air, Sovan lies on his own sleeping mat and listens to the same rain. He is thinking about the drawings he made today, the water workers in the canal, the way their bodies leaned into the current, the quality of concentration in a woman's face as she cleared silt from a spillway gate with her bare hands. He drew it quickly, without his usual hesitation, and when he looked at the drawing afterward, something was different. The figure was not posed. It was not arranged. It was doing what it was doing, and the line followed the doing rather than trying to precede it. It was not a good drawing, not yet, not by the standard the Bayon will demand, but it was an honest one, and for the first time the woman on the bark cloth looked like she might, at any moment, move. The rain continues. It falls on the thatched roofs and the sandstone towers and the surface of the barays and the sealed lids of prahok jars and the oiled wrapping around a sheaf of bark cloth studies. It falls on the neak ta stone at the base of the silk cotton tree, washing the remains of this morning's offering into the earth around the roots. It falls on the canals and the rice paddies and the household ponds and the sleeping city, and the sound of it is the sound of the world doing what it has always done, arriving, filling, sustaining, and in the fullness of time, transforming everything it touches into something else. The city breathes with it, the water rises, the season turns, and somewhere in the darkness, beneath the steady percussion of the rain on thatch, 3 women sleep in a house on stilts above a pond whose level will be higher by morning, and a man in a workshop compound holds a drawing in his mind that he has not yet made, a drawing of hands moving through water, of labor so familiar it has become invisible, of the ordinary life that no one has yet thought to preserve in stone. The rain will end, as it always does, not suddenly. The monsoon does not withdraw like a curtain pulled back from a window. It loosens its grip over weeks, the afternoon downpours arriving later, lasting less long, the mornings brightening earlier and staying bright. The water in the household ponds reaches its highest mark and holds there for a time, then begins, almost imperceptibly, to recede. The canals run clear again, the paths between the house mounds dry from mud to firm earth, and the footprints of the wet season, the deep ruts left by ox cart wheels, the erosion channels carved into the canal banks, are smoothed over by the traffic of daily life resuming its dry season shape. And so let us return, one last time, to the world we have been visiting, not to watch it change, but to see it continuing. Because that is what the ordinary life of a city does. It continues. The great events of history, the conquests, the coronations, the construction of monuments that will stand for 800 years, happen against a background of people doing what they did yesterday and will do again tomorrow, and finding in that repetition not monotony, but rhythm, not stagnation, but sustenance. Leap rises before dawn. She has done this for so long that the habit has outlasted the reasons for it. The children who once needed feeding at first light are grown. The animals that once demanded early tending are fewer now. The market mornings belong to Chan and Jorani. But the body remembers. The body knows that the day begins when the darkness begins to thin. And so she wakes and lies for a moment on the sleeping platform, listening to the roosters below, to the last insects of the night, to the breathing of her daughter and granddaughter beside her. She descends. 12 rungs. Her knees know the terms by now, and they hold. She reaches the ground, and the earth is cool and firm beneath her feet. The silk cotton tree is a dark shape against the barely lightening sky, and at its eastern root the Neekta stone waits as it has waited every morning of Leap's life in this compound. She lights the incense. The match flares and dies. The ember catches on the stick's tip and begins its slow, fragrant burning. Sandalwood and resin. The smell that means the boundary between the human world and the spirit world has been acknowledged, tended, kept open. She places a small portion of rice at the stone's base. She murmurs. The words are so familiar they have worn smooth in her mouth, like the ladder rungs under her hands, and their meaning is not in their content but in their continuity. The fact that they are spoken every morning by someone to something that does not answer but is understood to listen. She does not pray for anything in particular. She has not prayed for particular things in many years. What she offers is attention, presence, the maintenance of a relationship that is older than she is, older than her mother was, older perhaps than the compound itself, because the Neekta was here before the house was built, before the mound was raised, before the pond was dug. The Neekta belongs to the tree and to the earth beneath the tree and to whatever was here when the forest was first cleared and the border between the srock and the prey, the village and the wild, was drawn. Leap is not the origin of this practice. She is its current vessel, and what she is doing this morning, as every morning, is making sure the vessel does not empty before the next pair of hands is ready to take it up. Behind her, on the platform, Jorani stirs. The morning unfolds as it always does. Chan descends the ladder with her usual unhesitating ease and lights the three-stone hearth. The earthenware pot is set over the coals. The steam of rice water rises through the still air, and behind it comes the smell of the prahok, that familiar salt dark scent, so constant, so pervasive, so thoroughly woven into the texture of life in this city that to most of its inhabitants it is no longer a smell at all, any more than the sound of their own breathing is a sound. It is simply the way the world smells when the world is working as it should. Jorani fetches water from the pond. The level has dropped since the monsoon's peak. You can see the water line where the highest mark left a faint stain on the stones at the pond's edge. A dragonfly settles on the water's surface and lifts off again, touching its own reflection for a single instant. Jorani fills the earthenware vessel and carries it back to the platform, where she sets it down beside her mother without a word. Their hands know the morning, their bodies know the sequence. The choreography of the household has been rehearsed so many times that it has ceased to be choreography and become simply the way things are. Rice, water, fire, salt, the leaf bowls folded and filled and passed from hand to hand, the coconut husk ladles worn smooth by 10,000 meals. They eat on the platform, no table, no chairs. The rice is served on earthenware. The sauce comes in a small leaf bowl that does not leak even when full of liquid. Beneath them, the pigs root in the shade of the stilts, and two chickens conduct their eternal territorial dispute in the dust. Leap eats slowly. Her appetite has diminished in the way that appetites do when the body begins its long, patient process of requiring less. But she eats, and she watches Jorani, and something in her watching has the quality of a woman taking inventory, not of possessions, but of knowledge, checking that the things she has placed in her granddaughter's keeping are still there, still held, still alive. The incense direction, the eastern route, the offering before the first washing after the monsoon retreat, the words murmured at the stone in the thin light before dawn. Has Jorani absorbed these things? Leap cannot be certain. You cannot open another person's memory the way you open a jar and check the contents. You can only offer and repeat and trust. But this morning, and this is not a dramatic moment, not a turning point, barely a moment at all, Jorani pauses on her way back from clearing the meal and stops at the silk cotton tree. She stands before the Nikta stone for 3 breaths, perhaps 4. She does not light incense. She does not place an offering. She simply stands and looks, and something in her posture, the angle of her head, the stillness of her hands, tells Leap everything she needs to know. The granddaughter is not performing. She is not imitating. She is seeing the stone the way Leap sees it, not as an obligation or a habit, but as a presence, a neighbor, a responsibility that is also a relationship. Leap says nothing. She turns back to the platform and begins the slow negotiation with the ladder. Her knees hold. They will hold again tomorrow, and the day after that, and for however many days remain. And when they no longer hold, the morning will still begin, the incense, the rice, the murmured words, because the vessel will not be empty, it will have been passed, and the market opens, as it does each morning at sunrise. Chan and Jorani walk the familiar path through the compound and out along the canal, Chan with the prahok jars balanced in their cloth-padded basket, Jorani carrying the leaf materials and the measuring cups. The vendors are already arriving, unrolling their mats on the ground, arranging their goods. Bofa is at her usual place, the kramas and sampots folded in neat piles, the cotton still carrying the faint smell of the plant-based dyes that colored it. They exchange their morning words, nothing words, maintenance words, the social equivalent of the Neek TA offering. Somewhere at the edge of the market clearing, a man sits with a piece of bark cloth spread on a flat stone. He holds a stylus. He is looking at the market, but he is looking at it differently now, not searching for the ideal arrangement, but waiting for the real one, the one that exists only in the specific, unrepeatable conjunction of this woman's hands and this jar and this angle of morning light. His drawings have changed. They are looser, less certain of themselves, and for that reason closer to the truth they are trying to hold. The woman selling prahok does not know she is being studied. She does not need to know. What makes her worth depicting is precisely that she is not performing for anyone, not for the man with the stylus, not for the stone that will eventually receive his design, not for the centuries that will pass before someone stands in a gallery at the Bayonne and sees, carved in sandstone, a woman sitting on a mat with her hands in a jar and wonders who she was. She was no one famous. She was Chan. She was one of hundreds of thousands. She sold fermented fish in a market with no buildings, measured small transactions in cups of rice, sat on the ground, went bare-shouldered in a black cotton sampote, and went home each evening to a house on stilts where her mother tended a spirit stone and her daughter prepared the palm leaves on which the empire's records were written. Records that will not survive the century, let alone the millennium, because the monsoon will take them, as the monsoon takes everything that is not stone. But the stone remembers, not the names. The names are lost, as almost all names are lost. Not the specific family, or the specific compound, or the specific prahok recipe that Chan's grandmother taught her mother who taught her. What the stone remembers is the posture, the angle of the shoulder, the way a hand reaches into a jar, the way two people sit beside each other at a market mat with the easy proximity of bodies that have worked together so long they no longer need to coordinate. They simply move, and the movement is shared, the way breathing is shared by people who sleep in the same room. Walk, if you ever have the chance, along the outer galleries of the Bayonne, that extraordinary temple whose builders, for the first time in the history of the Khmer Empire, chose to carve not only gods and kings and battles, but the daily life of ordinary people. Walk slowly, let your eyes adjust, and look at the lower registers, where the grand military processions give way to something quieter. A woman at a market stall, a man at a board game, a fisherman drawing a net from the Tonle Sap, a cockfight with spectators gathered around, a woman giving birth under a shaded pavilion, a fortune teller, a man pulling out his whiskers with tweezers. Scenes so mundane, so unhistorical, so thoroughly ordinary, that no one before this moment in the empire's long reign had thought them worthy of preservation in stone. Someone thought they were worthy. Someone looked at the world's largest city, a city of thatched roofs and fish ponds and morning markets and fermenting jars and household shrines and women who ran the economy and men who smelted iron in furnaces they broke open to extract the bloom and grandmothers who kept the neekta fed, and decided that this, all of this, the life that would leave no other trace, deserved to be carved into sandstone and left for whoever came after. We do not know the carver's name. The stone does not remember that. Sandstone is not generous with individual credit, but the carvings themselves, The 1.2 kilometers of bas relief along the Bayon's outer gallery walls carry in their lines the evidence of someone who learned to see, someone who sat long enough, watched carefully enough, drew and failed and drew again until the figure on the stone was not a diagram of a person, but a record of a life being lived. The woman at the market mat is not posing, she is not waiting. She is reaching into a jar, and her shoulder drops the way a real shoulder drops, and her weight shifts on the mat the way real weight shifts, and the person beside her leans in without looking because they know where the other one is without needing to check. That is what the stone remembers, not the empire, not the god king, not the golden spires that Joe Dagwan reported seeing where we now see bare sandstone. What the stone remembers is the ordinary, the unremarkable, the unrecorded, the daily act of living performed so many millions of times by so many hundreds of thousands of people that it became invisible to everyone except, at last, to someone whose task it was to look. And now the evening comes. The market mats are rolled. The vendors walk home along the canal paths. The light turns amber, then copper, then the deep violet gray of tropical dusk. The temple towers darken against the sky, and for a moment, just a moment, as the last light catches the highest stones, they seem to glow with the gold that Joe Dagwan saw 800 years ago, the gold that is gone now, worn away by rain and centuries, but that once made the towers burn like lanterns above the tree line. Beneath those towers, in a house on stilts beside a pond where a dragonfly touched its own reflection this morning, Leap settles onto the sleeping platform. Her knees have made their last negotiation of the day. Chan is beside her, the warmth of her body familiar as the ladder rungs. Jorani lies at the platform's edge, her hand still carrying the ghost sensation of the afternoon's work, the smooth bark cloth, the polished stone, the steady rhythm of the mallet. The cicadas begin. The sound rises from every direction, from the silk cotton tree, from the canal banks, from the forest edge beyond the last house mounds, a sustained, shimmering hiss that is neither music nor silence, but something between the two, a sound so constant it becomes a kind of quiet. The incense at the Nikta stone has long since burned to ash. The stone sits in the darkness beneath the tree, holding whatever it holds, memory, obligation, presence, the accumulated weight of every morning's offering. It does not need to be tended again until dawn. It can wait. It has been waiting a long time. It will wait a little longer. The rain has stopped. The sky is clear. The stars above the temple city are the same stars that shone on the quarry workers at Phnom Kulen and the smelters at Tonle Bak and the canal pilots who steered the stone barges through the waterways and the women who ran the markets and the dancers who trained for 9 years to make their fingers speak and the scribes who wrote on palm leaves that would not last and the carvers who worked in stone that would. The same stars, the same sky, the same slow turning of the world that carries every city, every empire, every civilization forward into whatever comes next, not with drama, not with fanfare, but with the quiet, persistent, unremarkable momentum of ordinary people doing ordinary things, morning after morning, season after season, until the pattern of their living wears a groove in the surface of time deep enough to be remembered. Let the stars turn. Let the water settle in the barays. Let the prahawk darken in its sealed jars. Let the nikta keep its vigil beneath the silk cotton tree. And let the stone the patient, enduring, indifferent stone. Hold what it was given to hold, the image of a woman's hands in a jar, the angle of a shoulder, the weight of a body on a mat, the presence of a life that asked for nothing more than to continue, and was, in the end, granted something rarer. It was seen, it was considered worthy of preservation, and it was carved by hands we will never know into the walls of a temple that still stands, weathered, mossy, stripped of its gold, in the middle of a city that is gone.